Hello friends, this is Carrie and welcome back to I Like Reddit channel. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. Friends, today we have two pretty long stories out of the entitled People subreddit. So let's begin. Our first story is posted by Thanos Purple Boy. Karen followed me at the airport because I was a lost child. This probably needs some context before I start. Both my parents are divorced and live in two separate states. I live with my mom and grandparents in Nashville, Tennessee, while over school breaks I visit my dad in Rochester, New York. I've flown alone since I was 5, and when I turned 13, my parents said it would be okay if I travel without an escort on my layovers as long as I text them when I'm boarding and when I land. Fair enough. This happened when I was 16. Now, I don't look my age and never have. There's a bad combination in my family, short genes and a baby face. I was lucky enough to inherit both. To give you a rough image, I'm a 5-foot-tall girl who weighs about 125 pounds with a baby face. It's easy for people to mistake me as being younger than I am. Well, flying was always the worst offense because I was alone. I also have bad anxiety and stutter a lot when I'm nervous, so it only adds to the age confusion more. I was coming back from New York and had a 2-hour layover in Baltimore. I decided to get some food at Chipotle. While I was eating in the food court, minding my own business and scrolling through my phone, this middle-aged white blonde woman with her 2 kids walked up to me. We'll just call her Karen. Karen.
Hi, honey. Are you okay?
OP. Yes, why do you ask? Karen.
Well, you seem young and you're all by yourself.
Oh, great. Here we go again. This wasn't the first time this had happened, so I calmly told her that I was fine and thanks for the concern. Well, apparently Karen didn't like my answer. Her tone soon changed from caring, concerned citizen to demanding witch. She told me it wasn't fine because I was a minor by myself and needed adult supervision to fly. She was correct about the minor part, but the supervision part was complete hooey. I was flying Southwest, who allow anyone 12 and older to travel by themselves, but someone is still supervising you on the flight until you're 15. I didn't need adult supervision to be in the airport past security alone, and I told her this. I politely asked her to leave me alone, and I understand the confusion. Karen wasn't having it. Karen.
You're lying.
OP. How? Karen.
I have kids, and I know airport policy about minors.
OP. Clearly you don't. I've already said I'm fine, and can you please leave me alone? Karen.
No. Where are your parents?
OP. Doesn't matter. Karen.
Yes, it does. I need to complain to them.
I didn't want to tell her about the fact that my parents were divorced, but back then I saw it as the only way for her to fully understand the situation and leave me alone. OP. Ma'am, I'm 16 years old. My mom is in Nashville waiting for me and my dad is in New York. Neither of them is in this airport and they both know that I'm by myself and I'm okay with that. I'm allowed to have a layover by myself and I'm not considered an unaccompanied minor when I'm 16 years old according to the airline. Now please leave me alone. Karen.
No, you're lying.
OP. How am I lying? Karen.
I know you're lying because I have children and I know how rebellious they are and that you're definitely not 16 years old.
I was getting mad at this point. For one, what right do you have to tell me how old I am? And secondly, your children look 7 and 5 years old. A little too young to be going through a teenage rebellion. I stood up and put my food in my bag and told her, I think I know how old I am. Karen.
Where's your proof?
I took out my driver's license. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have, but I was desperate to get her to go away. With nothing only my birthday, but the fact that I had one in the first place signified that I was 16 or older. I didn't want to show this lady my other information, so I let her see my birthday and nothing else. Karen wasn't going to swallow her pride and walk away. Karen.
That still doesn't excuse you from walking around the airport by yourself. How do I know you're not running away from home?
I wanted to tell her that even if I was, it was none of her business. I repeated Southwest policy to her and I told her that if she still didn't believe me, she could go to their website or check for herself or ask an employee. And then I repeatedly asked her to leave me alone or I'd get security. My bluff didn't seem to affect her. She said I wasn't going anywhere and that I had to come with her to find my parents. I simply told her no and began to reach for my backpack. Karen grabbed my wrist and started pulling me. I yanked my wrist away and grabbed my backpack and started running. At this point, people were watching and her kids seemed distressed, but I didn't care. I made a run for my gate. Now, I'm not very athletic, but I'm definitely faster than this overweight single mom. I eventually made it to my gate and took a seat in one of the chairs. I told the lady at the gate what had happened, and I was still shaken up. She understood and said that she saw a woman matching the description near the gate. She'd make sure that she didn't come near me, and if she did, security would be alerted. Well, turns out my gut was right, and after about an hour, I saw her looking around the different gates. I told the lady, and she nodded. She instructed me to get behind the desk as Karen approached. Here's basically the conversation. Karen:
Excuse me, that child behind you is not allowed to be in the airport by herself.
She turned to me and asked me if I was an unaccompanied minor and answered no. Woman:
If she's not an unaccompanied minor, then she can be in the airport by herself.
Karen:
She's lying. She can't be 16. She showed me a fake ID.
Woman: Oh really? She turned to me and asked to see my boarding pass. I gladly handed it to her. She reviewed it and said it looked fine, and then she asked to see what I showed Karen. I handed her my driver's license. She also said it looked fine. Karen demanded the woman at the desk hand me over to her so that she could take me to her gate and find my parents. She scared me. I knew I wasn't going anywhere with this woman, but it didn't stop me from being scared. Woman: Ma'am, is this girl your child? Karen: No. Woman: Then I'm afraid I can't give her to you. I can assure you she's in good hands. Karen:
No, she's not, because she's rebellious and lying. I'm clearly more qualified to take care of her, considering I have children and you don't.
That did it. At this point, I could feel a panic attack coming on. The nice woman must have noticed this, and she told Karen that she could either go to her gate and leave me alone, or security would be called. Karen huffed and puffed and said that the front desk lady didn't know her own airline policies and that she would be calling 911 for child endangerment, and Southwest was going to get shut down for this. The lady at the desk only nodded. After Karen was done with her rant, she walked away before security could come. Before she left, the lady asked for her name so that she could file a complaint for her, an obvious lie, and she told her, "We'll just keep her name as Karen." The lady at the desk offered to find her gate and inform them of what had happened and made sure that she didn't leave her gate to make me feel safer. I agreed, and we found out that her gate was in the international terminal. Knowing this woman wanted to take me to a completely different terminal, the international terminal no less, made me even more scared. But I was assured that everything was going to be alright. Her gate was informed about the situation, and they said that they would make sure that she didn't leave the terminal once she arrived. It made me feel a lot better. I'm 19 now, and I still haven't grown taller. I'm in college now and still fly by myself. I'm still a little shaken up from the whole ordeal, but still fly by myself and make sure I carry around my ID and passport, and if anybody asks if I need help, I quickly answer no and walk away. That may make me look more suspicious, but I don't care. I'd rather come across as rude than have to deal with another crazy Karen. Man, this post got long, and thanks for reading all the way if you did. If you're enjoying the content so far, please put a heart emoji in the comment section down below. Our final story is by Karen Killed My Car. Karen accused me of stealing my own car, tricked a dumb cop into arresting me. Now my car is a wreck because he gave her the keys. I really don't care who believes this, but here's my story. I live in one of those middle of nowhere desert towns where almost everyone knows almost everyone, and it's hot as heck, but dirt cheap to buy a home or land. It's not uncommon for old cars to last out here, as they almost never rust and people keep fixing them. After high school, I worked my butt off at a local job to get my own place. I ended up buying a small plot of land with a trailer on it off of a local guy who decided to move to Texas. And the guy also sold me his old Ford Escort prior to that. It was a good first car, got me around well enough, still have it too. 10 years have gone by then. And for a while I spent a lot of my time tinkering with an old 87 Monte Carlo that I bought super cheap as it was without an engine or transmission. I love that car, as an older cousin of mine had one when I was a kid and I had always wanted one for myself. I spent 2 years fixing up the one that I got with some help from friends and finished it in 2019. Since the engine was missing, I dropped in a junkyard Chevy 305 V8 that was connected to a rebuilt 4-speed automatic transmission with low miles from a totaled car. I then painted it myself inside of a friend's garage with Harbor Freight sprayers and some GM black single-stage gloss paint and buffed it to a shine. I finished it up with some gold Monte Carlo decals and some classic moon rims I bought from a local junkyard and polished up. Also partially redid the interior by replacing the seats and put in a custom steering wheel. I'm not really a mechanic, but my friends all helped me, and online how-to videos on my smartphone really helped out as well. The car was fun to drive and it looked great. I kept it in good working order, that is until this mess went down. Now, I didn't really trust some of the local law enforcement out here, and this gave me even more reason not to. A lot of the cops around here are barely qualified for their job. They are practically hired with a handshake and told to play Doom for training. Granted, though, many of them are very nice. The sheriff is even kind of a friend of mine, but he's really one of the only competent ones there. Most of the rest don't really do their jobs very well, especially when a new one gets hired on. Like the guy that went out of his way to move to my town just to get a job as a cop. In this case, he was the nephew of the sheriff. He even bought his own Crown Victoria with a loudspeaker to drive it around town. Let's just call him NC for Nephew Cop, since he was the sheriff's nephew. Nephew Cop and I didn't really know each other personally yet, but I was aware of him. He was dumb as a rock and high on his own ego. He was like if Barney Fife and John Cena had an illegitimate son together because he was a tall and strong-looking man that was always giving people creepy looks and patrolled on foot up and down Main Street with a clipboard in hand and a big grin on his face. He also liked to publicly flex his muscles in front of people. On Saturday morning, I took my Monte Carlo out to meet a friend, but they ended up bailing because at the last minute there was an issue with their girlfriend. I thought, meh, no problem, I'll just get some fast food and go home. I went to a local burger place and got my meal to go. As I was walking out, this lady outside was looking at my car. She was bent over in a very short skirt. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed the view. People would stop here and there and ask me about the car and where I got it. I usually didn't mind talking so long as they were polite, though this woman ended up being anything but. She was curvy and good looking while wearing the miniskirt, but I'm guessing early to mid 30s or so? I'm not really sure. I asked her if she liked the car. She stood up and took one look at me and snickered. I asked her what was so funny. To get an idea of what I looked like at the time, I was a skinny guy with a scraggly beard and wearing a faded AC/DC shirt with the sleeves ripped off, along with worn, cut-off denim shorts and flip-flops. I guess she figured I was poor or something, so she was probably judging my appearance. She looked me up and down in a very obvious way and then said, "There's no way you could afford this car. You couldn't possibly afford something this nice." Now, I have a tendency to get sarcastic or snide when people make assumptions about me. So I said back, "Oh really, lady? The title is in my name and these keys right here in my hand also say I'm the owner." The Karen glared at me as I put the keys in the lock and began to open the door. I looked behind her and noticed a beige 90s Volvo with a missing headlight and had out-of-state license plates, parked not far from me. I put two and two together and laughed. "Let me guess, that's your car over there." She started to turn beet red and I laughed and said, "Don't be ashamed. Those things aren't lookers, but they'll run forever." I figured it was over, but as I was opening my car door, I suddenly felt nails digging into my shoulder. She was screeching so loud, my ears were hurting, and before I could turn around, she had kicked me between the legs from behind with high-heeled shoes, so hard I collapsed in agony. And true to my luck, Nephew Cop drove right up because he had heard her screeching from down the street during his noon patrol. As soon as Nephew Cop was out of his car, the Karen ran to him crying, saying that I was a carjacker and that I was attempting to take her new car. I wasn't looking at either of them, as I was on the ground wincing in the fetal position from the pain. The next thing I heard was Nephew Cop yelling, "Put your hands behind your back." I was pinned down by his knee into my spine and forcibly cuffed. I tried telling Nephew Cop that I knew his uncle and I could prove that I'm the real owner of the car, but he called me white trash and told me to shut up. Then he picked up my keys off the ground and actually handed them to Karen. Then he seemed to do the hero pose while she gave me a crap-eating grin. No matter what I said, Nephew Cop wasn't listening to me because He fully believed her. And then I had to see Karen start up my car and drive off with it. My heart sank as I watched it sail down the road with her flipping me off. Then Nephew Cop dragged me back to the sheriff's office. I'd hoped his uncle was in, but just my bad luck, he was out to lunch. So Nephew Cop put me in a cell and told me to keep quiet. I was furious. But I knew I wasn't going to make the situation any better, so I just waited. And during that time, Nephew Cop kept giving me looks of contempt, and at one time he walked across the cell with the nightstick grazing it against each bar as he was trying to intimidate me. At least an hour went by when the sheriff finally came in through the door nursing a big gulp, but he froze a second and said, "OP, what are you doing here?" he asked. I was about to speak when Nephew Cop jumped in and said, "I caught this lowlife creep trying to steal a lady's car, so I hauled him in." That's when I finally got my chance to speak and said, "Yeah, only it was my car. The one you know I spent so long fixing up?" Nephew Cop just rolled his eyes and said not to listen to me, but the sheriff silenced him and asked me for the full story. As I tried to tell it, Nephew Cop kept making dismissive looks and kept repeatedly interrupting until the sheriff told him to sit down and shut up. Then when I was finally able to say everything that had happened, the sheriff was furious. Sheriff laid into Nephew Cop, who was now cowering in his chair like a little boy and saying that that was indeed my car, and he stupidly gave my keys to a thief who assaulted me. Nephew Cop started frantically apologizing, trying to say that he was just trying to help, but the sheriff called him an idiot that just wanted to play the hero by saving a damsel in distress. And now the whole department would be in hot water for an unlawful arrest, physical assault against me. And he finally let me out of the cell and got me some ice for my crotch and got me taken home. The sheriff and Nephew Cop went back to the burger restaurant, but Karen's car was no longer there. They got CCTV footage from the camera the restaurant had looking outside. It caught everything minus audio. The Karen came back riding piggyback with a guy on a motorcycle over half an hour from the time she left with my car. She blew him a kiss and then drove off in her Volvo. The sheriff scrambled everyone, even Nephew Cop, to try and chase her down, but they couldn't find her as she had already driven out of the county lines. Some phone calls were made to other departments to look for her, and I had to sit at home with an ice pack on my crotch all evening waiting for news on what happened. A couple of days later, my car was found just a few miles out of town. The Karen had broken all the windows with what I'm assuming was a tire iron, and then put the car in neutral and let it coast down a deep, rocky hill, which rolled into the bottom ditch and smashed the front end and warped the frame. It was completely totaled. I wanted to cry from the sound of the metal grinding on the rock as the tow truck pulled it back up. Nephew Cop was there too. He couldn't even look at me the entire time. My insurance also didn't want to cover the car, so the sheriff's office was made to pay me the value of the Monte Carlo since Nephew Cop let it happen. This was only about $5,000. Though that was honestly close to what I had had into it since I did almost all the work by hand or with the help of friends. Nephew Cop also paid me another $2,000 for my troubles and said it was most of his savings. The Karen was caught at a motel a state over sometime later and arrested for soliciting prostitution and drug possession. Grand theft auto was just one of the many things she was charged with. I got on a video call just to see her in court and testify. She looked like a wreck the whole time because she knew she was screwed, and it wasn't long before she was pronounced guilty. She got 10 years behind bars with no possibility of parole. As for Nephew Cop, the sheriff all but begged me not to sue him because he was his nephew and he promised his sister that he'd look out for the guy. I'm not a sue-happy person, so I let it go provided that Nephew Cop actually takes some sort of course on how to properly do his job. And so the incident was more or less rug swept, and Nephew Cop was demoted to sitting at a desk all day answering phones. It would be docking part of his pay until every penny was paid back. He's still relegated to desk duty half the time these days, and he still avoids me anytime I'm near him. Arguably he's a better cop now, though, because he's mellowed out. As for me, it took some time, But with help, I finally located a replacement Monte Carlo project car with a clean title. And it was the same year too. I salvaged as many of the parts as I could from the old one and used it all in this build. The engine and the transmission were still good, and somehow so were most of the base parts. And the sheriff personally came by to help my friends and I build the new car in his downtime. It took a year, but now I've got a fresh looking Monte Carlo that looks like my old one. You'd never know that they weren't the same car. I've made sure to have better insurance this time around, and I'll be damned if I even let a Karen anywhere near my car again. That's all the stories I have for today. Links to the original Reddit post will be in the description box below. Please stop on by Reddit to show the OP some love and an upvote. If you enjoy my videos, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell notification to let you know when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.